logical flow of configuring your SmartZone environment has you configuring the controller settings first, then configuring your member access points and WLANs. Assuming that the initial system configuration settings have been made, and prior to configuring your access points and wireless LANs, it's time to think about how the SmartZone controller will be set up to manage your deployment infrastructure. SmartZone provides a hierarchical structure that allows you to segment and define management boundaries for your infrastructure. This is done by the use of subdomains. Subdomains are how you define administrative boundaries in the environment. There are three types of domains. First, we have the system domain. The system domain is the root domain that's created during the controller setup. As the system administrator, you'll log into the system domain with full system administrator rights. On a newly built SmartZone high-scale controller, you will see only the default system domain. Underneath the system domain, we also have what are called subdomains. Subdomains are created in order to define an administrative boundary. You can create subdomains and assign rights to other administrators to access and manage subdomains. The subdomains will inherit system domain settings by default. You also have the option to create partner domains. Partner domains are similar to subdomains, but unlike the subdomains, partner domains have some system settings configurable at the partner domain level. A partner domain can contain multiple subdomains. You can delegate administrative functions of subdomains to designated administrators, some of whom may be outside of your organization. This model is popular for managed service providers or MSPs who need their own partner domain on your controller. You'll learn how to provide domain access to additional administrators in this demonstration. Once partner domains and subdomains have been created, and you also have administrative access that's been assigned, it would then be time to create zones. Whereas domains define administrative boundaries, zones define the settings that will be applied to the access points. Zones can be created within the system domain, a subdomain, or within a partner domain. Zones can be created according to logical boundaries where you don't want access points operating together. For example, if you wanted to have specific settings such as a country code or specific WLANs applied to the access points. Maybe you'd like to deploy zones with different firmware in order to support older access point models or test features. When access points successfully register to the controller, they will eventually be placed in an access point group inside a zone within a subdomain. The access points will download the system configuration settings defined within the zone, and the settings will be applied to the access points. Because of this, it is logical then to configure the zone settings prior to having the access points join the zone. Again, if we are referring back to our original diagram that showed the order of configuring your controller, the settings there, the domain settings, and then getting into configuring access points and your WLANs. On an Essentials controller, there's only the system domain. This is the single administrative boundary on your controller. You can provide administrative access with different levels of rights to administrators who perform tasks within your domain. You will learn how to do this later in this demonstration. As with high scale, you can create zones. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into doing a demonstration of some of this domain administration, creating domains, and then we'll get into the security aspect of it and what accounts, administrative accounts, will be assigning to these different domains. So from the dashboard, we're on the main site for the SmartZone. Again, we're in, here you see we're in high scale. So if you were to think about the concept of what we just talked about, really the domain concept is more for high scale than it is for essentials. Essentials, there's a system domain which we create zones underneath that. But with the high scale, we have kind of a multi-tenancy aspect to it, and then also have different administrative boundaries that we can create with subdomains. So from the main screen, we're working off a high scale virtual SmartZone here. I'm going to go to the access points menu, and this is where we go in and actually do the configuration of our domains, and when you'll get into zones, which we haven't really talked too much about yet, but this is all created in the access point menu here. So you see that we have the default system domain. So that's your root domain that we discussed earlier. And that's where all the main super user, super admin account and settings are going to happen. And those configurations basically stream down to domains underneath that, or subdomains. So the other thing you'll notice is that we've got the staging zone. So it's a concept that we haven't really talked about yet, but the staging zone is the place where access points that are contacting with the controller, but they haven't been assigned to a particular domain. That's a domain or zone. That's where they go initially. So it's kind of a drop-off point, a parking location until they're assigned to a particular domain and zone, the respective zones. Okay, so we're just going to do a simple example. You see we've got very familiar icons, very intuitive. I got a plus sign to create a domain or zone or group. We'll have an edit button, a clone button, and a delete. So we'll get into that in just a second. But let's go ahead and create a domain. So I am selected on the system domain, the root domain. So I'm going to hit click the plus sign. And all I'm going to do here is go ahead and give this a friendly name. So let's say I want to make some administrative boundaries for different locations that I have. So let's say for headquarters, I'm just going to call it HQ. And then I've got what I'm creating is a domain. Notice here it says managed by partner. So I'm not enabled on this particular example. But this is where I would go in if we talked about having either a subdomain or a partner domain, and this is where that delineation happens when you actually do the configuration. So let's create the headquarter domain. We click OK. And again, we're basically making a container in the hierarchy that will be assigning permissions to that. And then once we have these domains set up, what we'll end up doing is creating zones that will be used. And then in those zones, you'll have access points and WLANs that are actually configured. So let's say I've got this subdomain HQ. Let's go ahead and click another one, create another one, excuse me. And let's just say New York City is another location administratively that I want to separate out. So basically I've got two subdomains now, one for headquarters and one for New York City. So those administrators that I'll be assigning to each of those will have respective permissions to manage those networks once we get them set up. Okay, so let's say I wanted to create a partner zone. So the multi-tenancy aspects of things, you know, for MSPs and things like that, if I want to create that. So I'm going to go ahead and do another creation here. I'm just going to call it MSP1 for simplification. It's a domain as well. I want to go ahead and select managed by partner, as that will be a partner domain that we're creating. We come back out and notice that the different icons that we have represented on the left-hand side here, they're a little bit different. So the D obviously signifies a domain, but notice that the partner domain is a little bit different. We have basically a person icon with the D there that signifies the partner domain. Okay, so as I talked about in the structure before, under these, we can actually create other subdomains. So let's say if I select on the MSP here, I want to create some, other domains that are they're going to go underneath that. So I'm just going to call this D1 again, just for simplification here, and that will create a subdomain. And if I select this and expand it out, you see that I've got D1. So again, the context of what you've got selected on is where it's going to create the object. And let's say create another one, D2 for domain 2, and that'll be another subdomain. And again, these are just administrative boundaries. So if I expand this out, I've got the two subdomains that are part of that partner and fall under that partner domain. Okay, so now we have a kind of simplified structure. What we'll get to now is actually creating some of these administrator accounts or tying into another user database so that we have accounts that will be assigning permissions to these different resources and these different containers that we've created. Okay, so now let's go ahead and get to the next step, which is creating the administrator accounts and setting that up and giving access to the different resources in the environment. So what we're going to do is select the administration tab on the left here, and automatically selected the admin and roles. That's the page we're trying to get to. So what you'll notice here is we've got 5-tab page here. We've got groups, administrators, AAA, ACL, and account security. So the main two that we're going to be looking at for securing things are the groups and the administrators, but let's go ahead and look at a couple of these other tabs just so that you're aware that they exist. There's basically two options you have when it comes to defining administrators for this environment. So one of them is a local database, which will in a minute we'll go ahead and show you how to create accounts for that. Or you can tie into with AAA. We can tie into a Radius or AttackX server. So this is kind of standard stuff here. It's a little beyond the scope of the demo, but just know that, let's say if you wanted to authenticate against Active Directory and you've got Radius server built in to do that, you can do that, and you have authentication that you can be using outside of the local database of SmartZone. So go ahead and cancel here. Also ACL, we can create an ACL. And what this does is actually creates an ACL for the management interface. And if I click create here, it's very simple where I can limit the accessibility of the management application for SmartZone to a specific IP range, or a subnet, and just securing the access a little bit. The other thing you can do here is with account security, I can create a policy here to where this is going to control account lockouts, password expirations, and things like that. So again, just so you're familiar with that it's here and some of the stuff that you can set up beyond what we're about to talk about. So the first thing we need to do is actually go in and create a couple of accounts. So I'm on the second tab here, the administrators tab. And what you'll see here is I've got the system domain and I've also got my partner domain. So those are the two different places that I can actually create accounts. Notice that the other subdomains that were created are not listed here. So again, those are the two different containers that we can create new accounts with. So from the system domain, I'm going to go ahead and create an account. And I'm going to call it HQ admin, which matches my subdomain that I created, which was called HQ. Go ahead and set a password for this. And I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And it creates it for me. Let's go ahead and we're going to go ahead and create another one for the New York City admin. And then let's go ahead and go in and create a couple of accounts for the partner domain, which is our MSP1. So I'm going to select on the left-hand side, so I'm in the context of MSP1, click create here. And I'm going to go ahead and do MSP1 super user or super admin and set a password for that. Okay, so again, this is the only account here. If I go click on system, I've got these other accounts that are created. But let's go back to the MSP1. I'm going to go ahead and click create again. And remember, we had some subdomains that were part of this. So I'm going to go ahead and do MSP1 D1 admin. And at this point, that's all I'm going to create. Let me go ahead and finish this. Okay, so now I have, as you see, I've got several different accounts that have been created. So what we're going to do now is we've got the account set, but we haven't really said what they have permissions to, so which is a very important part of it. So the group tab, this is where we actually go in and kind of assign permission roles for the different objects that are in our environment. So I'm going to go ahead and we've got the domains, the system domain selected here on the left. Go ahead and click create. So this is going to bring us through a workflow that we've got to basically define a couple things, basically setting up these roles that are going to be used by the administrators in these groups. So for the first thing here, I'm going to go ahead and for this, I'm going to say that it is the New York City admin. What I'm going to do here is on the permission, you've got several different roles, if you will, that can be assigned to this particular group. Okay, so for the New York City admins, I want to go ahead and make them super admins. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and show you, there's this table where it actually defines the different permissions that you have. So you've got the super admins, you've got things like the guest pass administrator, things like that, to where you can actually see what each of those different groups, what permissions they actually have. And then with the accounts security, I'm just going to go ahead and use the default here. So go ahead and click next. So because I selected the super admin, notice that we've got the select resources over here and then the selected resources. So if I've selected if I did not do custom on the previous step for the permissions, any of those predefined roles are going to go ahead and automatically populate this, and you cannot change or change the definition of these. If I go back here and if I were to go to custom and click next, see that the resources are over here on the left-hand slide, and I basically select what they have access to, not only the different objects that are in the environment, but then what they have. Do they have modify, they have read, or they have full access? Okay, so I'm going to go back. Go ahead and go back to super admin. Click next. These are the resources. Click next. So the domain, so this one was the New York City admin, so go ahead and select the New York City, and I need to move it over to the right-hand side. And the administrators. So I'm going to take the New York City admin, and I'm going to add this to this group. And then basically it's looking for you to review, which everything should be as we want it. So we'll go ahead and click OK. And that's basically set up a group that has policy. The New York City admin administrator has super admin privileges for the NYC domain that we've created. So let's go ahead and do the same thing for our MSP one. I'm going to go ahead and click create. And we had created an account for the MSP one D1 admin. So I'm going to go ahead and create that. I'm going to go ahead and say that they super admin for this as well. Click next. Everything is selected here. The objects are a little bit different because we're at the partner domain instead of the system domain or subdomain. And then we did D1, so I'm going to go ahead and select D1 here for my subdomain. Again, this is a subdomain to the partner domain, the MSP1. And then I've got the D1 admin here is the account that I want to add to this group. We go ahead and do the review, click OK. And so for the D1 admin, the group, we're going to go ahead and for the domain D1 as super admin. So we can go ahead and click on this if we wanted to, and it's got the information for this. So this is basically the mechanism that you're going to go in and create. Again, the first part of what we did was we created these different domains, and then what we're doing is creating administrator accounts and giving the administrators different levels of access. So, I just did super admin on a couple of these examples, but if you wanted, let's say, an administrator that just had read access to something, you have the granularity that you can actually go in there and change some of these settings. So let's go ahead and go back out to the main dashboard. So I'm going to go ahead and log off. Again, I'm logged in as admin to the system domain. So if I click on the admin button here and do log off, that's going to log me off. And what I'm wanting to show you is some of these accounts that we just created. Just kind of, I mean, it's very intuitive. Obviously, the permissions that we set, you would anticipate that they work, but I think sometimes it's good just to actually see what it's going to look like from an administrator view. So I've got my NYC admin account that I created. I'm going to go ahead and put the password in for that and log in. Okay, so this is, again, the permissions we assigned it were to just the New York City subdomain. So if I go to the access points, which typically we don't have a lot built up yet, so we don't have our zones and WLANs and things like that. So you're not going to see a lot of objects under here, but what I want to point out is, again, I'm logged in as NYC admin up here. I can see the New York City subdomain that's been created. If I had zones and things, they would actually be showing up under here under the domain as well. And notice that I do have access to this staging zone as well. So this is me logged in as the New York City admin. So let's go ahead and log off. And let's go ahead and log in with one of our partner accounts that we created. So it's a little bit different with the partner account. So I'm going to go ahead and put in MSP1. And you see here I've already pre-populated this from before. MSP1 D1 admin. Notice this is a little bit different though. What I'm doing is putting at MSP1. So this is the domain, if you remember, it's basically the partner domain name. And this account is part, if you remember, when we created the account, it was part of that partner domain. Okay, so that's, we're putting the at MSP1 there. Let me go ahead and put the password in. And we'll get in here, we'll go back to the same place, to the access points here. And so the view is just going to be a little bit different here. We've got the system and we've got MSP1. And this one, again, remember that we're MSP1 D1 admin. Okay, so we didn't give them access to the top domain, but we gave them access to D1. So note, if you remember when we were creating domains, there was another subdomain called D2. That's not visible or accessible for this particular administrator. So again, fairly intuitive. Create the administrator accounts. Actually, let me retract just a little bit more. We created the domains. You've got the different options of creating the subdomains, or you can do the partner domains and then subdomains under that. Basically, you're giving yourself hierarchical structure that is giving you some administrative boundaries and be able to have basically containers of what people can administer. Because you obviously, as one person will be not me managing most networks. So you've got the domains creation. Then we're going to go in and create the administrator accounts or tie in through Radius or TACAX. And then we're going to go ahead and set some group, which is basically giving permissions to those different accounts, to the different objects, to the different domains. And then once we've got that, once we logged in, those users have permissions to whatever you assign to them.